Welcome to PatsCast. The Patriots had their 15th practice of the preseason today, the first of two joint practices with the Minnesota Vikings, their biggest test so far. And there were flashes. There were flashes out there of what this Patriots offense can potentially be. But to say they passed the test is a bit of a stretch. That said, I don't think they failed it either. Full pads, just under 2 hours, and a brutal test going up against Brian Flores and his blitz-happy defense. Second in DVOA last year. They threw disguises, pressures, lots of chaos at Drake Maye. And of course, the defense stood tall against J.J. McCarthy. Lots of explosive plays today, some costly sacks on the offensive side of the football. And Stefon Diggs was back out there today, playing pretty well. Really has been quiet for the majority of training camp so far, going up against his former team, his first team in the NFL. Let's unpack this high-stakes session. The Patriots really going into Minnesota. This was a facility that Mike Vrabel has praised. You look at the pictures, you look at the videos, state-of-the-art facility, nothing like the Patriots have at Gillette Stadium, although they'll be improving that next year. But a place that Vrabel took his Titans team during the preseason, and that's the reason he wanted to go back his first season with the Patriots. Let's start with Drake Maye. He went 13 of 19 today with 2 touchdowns in team periods. Those stats sound good, but there were also 6 sacks. So it was not a great day for the offensive line. I'll get to all of that in just a second, but for the most part, Drake Maye handled Brian Flores' complex coverage as well, but he was overwhelmed by constant pressure from all the blitzes, all the disguises, all of the different things that Brian Flores likes to do. But like I said, there were some splashes today. A 70-yard touchdown pass to Travion Henderson on a wheel route in a 2-minute drill. Second play of that 2-minute drill, exploiting a blown coverage. Drake Maye saw it right away, threw it easily to Henderson, who, of course, can outrun any player on the field and get to the end zone. Henderson, of course, having an incredible camp. Great first preseason game. Excited to see what he can do on Saturday in their real game against the Vikings. But that was the play of the day from Drake Maye. Travion Henderson seems to always be involved in the play of the day, and he's a guy. We probably talk too much about who should be the starting running back because all these guys are going to play, but I think Travion Henderson is the best back out there. Now, that doesn't mean it's not going to be Ramondre, first snap, week 1, or Antonio Gibson, but Travion Henderson just brings a different element to this team that we haven't seen before. Speed, blocking at the running back position, just an explosiveness, and he showed it once again today. Drake Maye also hit Mac Hollins for a deep touchdown. Of course, Mac Hollins, after the TD, punted the ball into the stands and was flagged. Apparently, after practice, he said he might get a talking to from Mike Vrabel, but he felt it would motivate the team and that he would be willing to do it again and take the fine if it motivated his teammates. So, good excuse there from Mac Hollins, but you probably shouldn't be doing that after a touchdown, but it is just a practice. Drake Maye also questionable whether or not it was a sack, but had a nice one-footed pass to Kayshon Boutte, his only reception of the day. That really showed Drake Maye's athleticism. So those were the 3 big highlights, but, hit Stefon Diggs a bunch of times, one on an in-cut, a short out, Demario Douglas a few times, a bubble, a short over the middle, a sail route. Austin Hooper, he hit for 7 yards, Kyle Williams for a 7-yard out. Hit Travion Henderson a number of times, also a screen pass, a jump pass. The person who is really struggling, and there seems to be some chemistry issues there, is Drake Maye and Kyle Williams. Maye overthrew a deep ball to Williams. He also had, who was wide open, by the way, also had a high miss to Demario Douglas and a near interception, which should have been caught by Byron Murphy. That was also a communication issue and an incomplete jump pass screen to Demario Douglas. So a bit of, some chemistry issues with Drake Maye. We saw it last year with Demario Douglas. We're seeing it with the other young receiver, Kyle Williams, out there. So that's something they'll work on, something they'll get a little bit better at. But overall, Drake Maye, when he was not under pressure, was doing what he needed to do out there. Situational work 45 seconds left in the game. They were near midfield. Maye only went 1 of 3 on his passes to Diggs there. One of them, I guess, went out of bounds. An incompletion to Booty. A deep miss to Mac Hollins on an all-out blitz from the Vikings. Really feeling the pressure all day long. Also drew a defensive penalty on a scramble throw to Demario Douglas. So a lot of positives, but also a lot of negatives. Most of the negatives you really can't put on Drake Maye. Did almost throw an interception, but for the most part, he took care of the football out there, which was a big question, right? I mean, we've all talked about Drake Maye and his mistakes, all the interceptions, the turnovers last year, the fumble, strip sack that happened the first game of the preseason. He held his own out there against the Minnesota Vikings and against a defense that is probably more complex than anything the Patriots are going to see this season, outside of maybe the Baltimore Ravens. We know they can give any offense fits, but Maye said out there after practice, I can help the line out, be more demonstrative. They're going to get us sometimes. And look, Drake Maye showed it all training camp. Like, he understands this offense. He understands how to change protections at the line, and he knows how to do it. It's really just a matter of him continuing to step into that leadership role, communicating, over-communicating out there, and, doing everything quickly, getting in and out of the huddle, which he has done pretty well in the Josh McDaniels offense, which is asking a lot because sometimes they get in the huddle and they'll call 2 different plays because, and we saw this with Brady so many times, they would do it with like 3 or 4 different plays with Brady, but you do the alert, you change the play, you go to plan B. Drake Maye gets in and out of the huddle quickly. It's just a matter of that pre-snap stuff that, he needs to get a little bit sharper at, but he knows how to do it. We've seen it plenty of times throughout training camp. The issue isn't him learning Josh McDaniels' offense. It is just him leaning into it more, becoming more of a leader, being more vocal, which he still is kind of a rookie. He has kind of an awkward personality. Seems like a likable guy, but, he needs to step in and be a bit more of a hard ass out there pre-snap and with his teammates, and he isn't quite there yet, which of course is hard to step into. I mean, he's heading into year 2. Tom Brady didn't even take over until 4 games into year 2. So that'll improve. That'll get better. I'm not too worried about that, but that really has been a focus for Mike Vrabel and Josh McDaniels with Drake Maye throughout camp, is just making him more of a leader. And he's done the right things, inviting the receivers over to his place in North Carolina during the summer, learning the offense, figuring out what to do pre-snap. He just has to be a bit more vocal out there and over-communicate a little bit more. Josh Dobbs really struggled today, went 6 of 11 passing, 2 interceptions, including a pick 6 on a Mac Hollins out route. The other one went to Jay Ward on a pass to Efton Chisholm, who had a pretty decent practice today. 2 sacks when he was out there. He did hit Baker for a 50-yard touchdown leaping grab. So Javon Baker had the highlight of the day with Josh Dobbs on the field. Hit Chisholm quite a bit in the quick game. Tight throw over the cornerback Vaughn there with Minnesota. Hollins, he hit once again on play action. JaMychal Hasty, remember him. He was hit by Josh Dobbs, but for the most part, Dobbs had a rough time out there against that very complex defense. But the reason both quarterbacks struggled, for the most part, was the offensive line. And sadly, I wish I could say it wasn't the left side of the offensive line, but it was. You had Will Campbell at left tackle, Jared Wilson at left guard, Garrett Bradbury back out there at center against his former team. Michael Wenu at right guard had an excellent practice, same with Morgan Moses at the right tackle position. But Will Campbell seemed a bit overwhelmed today. Doesn't mean Will Campbell's going to be a bust or anything, but this was his biggest test so far, and he allowed 2 sacks. Now, he did go 1-0-1 in the one-on-one drills before they got into the actual team drills. So no losses for Will Campbell there. He won against Jonathan Grenard, who is a very strong edge rusher, so good to see Will Campbell do that. He has struggled in one-on-ones at times throughout training camp, but when it actually came to the team drills, which Campbell, for the most part, has excelled at, he really struggled against the multiple level pressures that Brian Flores generates with that defense. So the left side really struggled. Same with Jared Wilson. He gave up a sack, struggled in one-on-ones, didn't win any, lost one, tied another against Jason Hargrave. So that was really the vulnerability in the offensive line, is the young guys. Now, I think Will Campbell had a pretty good week one, first preseason game. Jared Wilson, the more you look at the tape, he struggled quite a bit, and that seems to be more technique, fundamental stuff that Wilson's not really used to, because you have to remember, he played center at the University of Georgia last season, which is why I was hoping, because I'm not super encouraged about Garrett Bradbury. I was hoping he would start at the center position, but they seem to have settled at this point on Jared Wilson at the left guard and Garrett Bradbury at center. But he's a smart guy. Like, he'll figure those things out, but again, this is a tough veteran defense, veteran defensive coordinator, former head coach, formerly in New England. We all know Brian Flores played a key part in that last Patriots Super Bowl victory, and the young guys really struggled. But Garrett Bradbury also struggled. He allowed one sack. He had 2 holds, one on a stuffed Antonio Gibson run. He went one for two, in one-on-ones, but with the team drills, he really struggled with some of those middle blitzes when they brought lots of pressure to the center. So really, the center to the left side, the offensive line struggled. Now, Mike Onwenu, no major pressures today, so he did an excellent job. Like I've said, he's quietly had a pretty good training camp. The conditioning doesn't seem to be an issue. Morgan Moses was very reliable today, very minimal pressure from him. He also went 2-0 in one-on-ones versus Dallas Turner. So this is about the workload management. Morgan Moses hasn't practiced a ton, has been very limited throughout most of training camp. But now you're in the real important joint practices on the road against Minnesota, one of the best defenses, if not the best, in the NFL. And Moses and Onwenu did a good job out there. So it really just comes down to experience, right? You have the 2 rookies on the left side struggling against Flores' complex defense, whereas the 2 veterans, Onwenu and Moses, did great on the right side, and then Garrett Bradbury, who is a veteran in the center, frankly is not very good. So that's why the O-line struggled. Drake Maye under pressure, 6 sacks. Josh Dobbs sacked twice. It's going to be tough, right? It's going to be tough early on. I think we're going to see a lot more emphasis on the quick game. The Patriots are going to run the football, particularly in the first half of the season, quite a bit, because really the run blocking has been better than the pass blocking, and that's what Mike Vrabel did in Tennessee. That's what Josh McDaniels really leaned on his last few years in New England. The last Patriots Super Bowl, they ultimately won it because they relied heavily on the run game. And then, of course, they had Tom Brady out there with the play action and keeping teams on their toes. But it's going to be a run-heavy offense, I think. But they're trying a lot with the passing game, and these are the times to do it. Because you're probably not going to go up against a defense this good all season until you play the Baltimore Ravens in one of the last few weeks of the regular season. So, again, it wasn't a bad practice. It wasn't a great practice. But for the most part, the offense, they are who we thought they were, but plenty of good tape for them to build on, particularly with the rookies, and now they know what the NFL is like, and now they know just how difficult, how complex things can get, and Will Campbell and Jared Wilson, they have something to build off of now, and it'll be interesting to see how tomorrow's joint practice with the Vikings goes with those 2 young rookies on the offensive line. For the receivers, like I said, Stephon Diggs had a pretty good practice, 2 catches in team drills, but absolutely dominated in one-on-ones against his former team. Really, this is the first practice since, very early on in training camp, before they even put on pads, where Stephon Diggs has really flashed, shown his speed, showed his quickness, the route running, and yeah, he had a couple catches in team drills, but he really showed it in one-on-ones today. Perhaps he was motivated going against his former team, or the fact that he was limited in joint practices last week with the Commanders, didn't play in the preseason game. Hopefully we'll see him out there on Saturday. Demario Douglas did have a fumble today, which wasn't great, but other than that, he shined with 3 catches in team drills. The fumble did come on a screen pass, which was ultimately recovered by the Vikings. got to hold on to the football. This is something that Mike Vrabel keeps talking about. Certainly was very critical of Drake Maye for fumbling in the preseason game, and he's going to get on his receivers, particularly the young guys, on ball security. And Demario Douglas losing the football, recovered by the defense, not great there. But other than that, he had a very good practice. Efton Chisholm was unguardable today. Of course, he's going out there with the twos. He's doing one-on-ones with the twos for the Minnesota Vikings. Did have 2 catches in team drills, but in one-on-ones, they can't guard him. Like, he has a spot on this roster. I don't know how you keep him off the roster at this point. It's kind of sad because I don't think there's much room for playing time unless Demario Douglas gets hurt, but we know he can contribute on special teams, and this is a guy to watch for years to come in New England, assuming he does make the roster. Mac Hollins, 2 catches, including a deep touchdown. I mentioned he was flagged for celebration, punting the ball into the stands. Targeted on a near interception on a deep 4th down miss, doing 4th down drills, but brings a lot of energy to this locker room. Kind of a bizarre guy, walks around barefoot when he isn't on the field, into the grounding thing. But Mac Hollins slowly getting better. Didn't do much in the preseason game last week. I think we're going to see the ones out there a lot more on Saturday, going up against a good defense. And you have to remember, the Patriots, they play the Giants next week on the road, and I think that's a fairly quick turnaround. It's either a Thursday or Friday game. I'm going to have to check, but it's very possible they take the second preseason game more seriously than they do the third one on much shorter rest. The third one may just be like, who makes the roster, who doesn't? We have to make some hard decisions. Let's see those guys go out there. So Minnesota's the best team they're facing. You could say it's Washington, but they didn't play anyone in the first week. I think Minnesota's going to play all their horses on Saturday. So this is a really good chunk of days for the Patriots to assess where they're at. Another joint practice. They only had 1 with the Commanders, 2 with the Vikings. The Vikings take these a hell of a lot more seriously than the Commanders did. I think they're going to take the preseason game more seriously as well. More on the receiver position, Javon Baker, 2 catches. Again, I mentioned had a 50-yard touchdown pass from Josh Dobbs on a leaping grab. It really was not a great throw from Dobbs, but Baker got it. Did drop an open go ball, so kind of mixed results there. But Baker is continuing to contribute on special teams. He took a player down. It nearly sparked a fight, but this is one of those things where Mike Vrabel is watching going, okay, I'm sure Vrabel has started a number of fights or near fights during training camp. I think Vrabel sees a lot of himself in Javon Baker. There's obviously a lot of maturity issues there, and we've seen it surface throughout training camp, but he is a lot more buttoned up than he was last year, and he's certainly doing plenty on special teams to make a case for making the roster, and he is a 50-50 ball, go up and get it type receiver. They don't have many of those on the roster other than Mac Hollins maybe. So I think Baker continues to make a case for making the roster. Of course, Kayshon Boutte has been either the first or second best receiver out there throughout training camp. Didn't do a lot today, just with 1 catch. But Boutte's not going to miss the roster. And neither is Kyle Williams as a rookie, an early round draft pick. But he continued to have kind of an underwhelming day. Been very quiet throughout most of training camp. That said, I was critical of Kyle Williams. I mentioned this on the last podcast. I was critical coming out of the preseason game. His release, his speed, his quickness, it's excellent. He has good hands. He just really hasn't had many good throws to him throughout training camp in the preseason. So, Josh Dobbs said, I owe you a touchdown on that bad slant pass that he threw, which should have been a touchdown last weekend. So I think Kyle Williams is going to get his chances, and hopefully this preseason game, I think he's going to get a ton of playing time. Like, he's not going to be out there with the starters, but he's a guy that may be out there second quarter through the rest of the game, and hopefully we'll finally see a little bit from Kyle Williams. The defense played pretty well today against J.J. McCarthy, who I really like. I was one of the few Patriots fans that was saying maybe they should consider J.J. McCarthy over Drake Maye. I'm glad they didn't because McCarthy missed his entire rookie season. But he is a very fundamentally sound quarterback. And as expected, though, with this Patriots defensive line, they generated consistent pressure on McCarthy throughout all of the practice today. They had 4 run stuffs in team drills and 7 sacks. So they win the sack battle. 6 sacks against Drake Maye, 7 against J.J. McCarthy. I don't think either offense is pleased by that performance, but the defense gets a slight edge there. Looks like the defense was flagged a lot in practice today, which is a little concerning, but overall they were able to get to the quarterback. Marcus Jones had a nice interception on an overthrown J.J. McCarthy pass. So it was a defensive-heavy day on both sides of the field. That's kind of to be expected. The Vikings are a very good defense. They have, one of the best offensive head coaches in the league. So you would expect their offense to look a little sharper than they did today. But maybe the Patriots defense is just that good. So I would say both offenses performed similarly. Both defenses dominated. Do you give the Patriots the slight edge because they had one more sack? Probably not. But I think calling it a draw is a moral victory, right? With this young offense that the Patriots have, with Drake Maye learning a new offense, a very complex one, dealing with the constant pressure from Brian Flores' defense, the young offensive linemen out there, the many young receivers out there. The Vikings, of course, had a young quarterback, but they also have quite a few veterans on that offense. So calling it a draw means it was a success for the Patriots. And look, they've seen it once, right? They've seen the Vikings once. What are they going to do on day 2 of joint practices? If the Patriots come out there tomorrow and win the joint practice, and similar to what they did last week against the Washington Commanders, then we should be very excited. We should be very excited. But even if it is another draw, it's still a nice building block for this offense. How do they correct their mistakes? How does Will Campbell and Jared Wilson correct their mistakes? Are they going to be watching tape all night, figuring out how to deal with this defense? Going to be a tight turnaround, but they're young. They should be able to learn quickly. Jared Wilson certainly can learn quickly. Will Campbell, early draft pick, should be able to learn quickly. And Drake Maye is not the kind of guy who tends to make the same mistake twice, other than throwing the football to the other team in the final seconds of the game. He's done that quite a few times. But both guys, or all 3 guys, are young, high IQ, and I think they should have a better practice tomorrow. If they don't have a better practice, it's a bit of a disappointment. But again, I don't think Drake Maye had a bad one today. It's just hard to assess when you're under pressure that much, and you're also in the red jersey, so you're not actually getting sacked. Again, you had the pass to Booty today where he was going down, or allegedly going down in the red jersey. So it is very difficult to assess, but I will take a draw, and if the Patriots win tomorrow, then sky's the limit for this team going up against this defense. Some of the players that were out, Christian Gonzalez, not out there. I believe he did travel with the team. Ramondre Stevenson, I guess there's some residual lingering stuff from the Commanders game. Doesn't sound like it's a serious injury, so perhaps he'll be back out there tomorrow. But he didn't practice today. Hunter Henry, I think, is expected to be back out there tomorrow, but he didn't practice. Jalen Polk, probably not going to practice. Same with Jelani Tavai, Kendrick Bourne. I don't think Kendrick Bourne or Polk are making the team at this point. Efton Chisholm and Javon Baker are doing, I think, just enough out there to get Mike Vrabel a little excited about the potential with both of those players. So, yeah, I wouldn't expect Christian Gonzalez to be out there tomorrow, but him traveling with the team, it doesn't sound like a major hamstring injury. Hopefully he gets some work in the final preseason game. But, some concerns with Ramondre Stevenson, a 3-day absence. They lost Lan Larison. So, you're losing some players and the season hasn't even started. But for the most part, all the horses are out there and they're doing what they need to do. Special teams, Andy Borregales took all of the reps today, which means tomorrow is probably going to be a John Parker Romo day. Borregales went 5 of 6, did miss a long field goal from 54 yards. Quite a few players involved in the kick return game. Travion Henderson, Antonio Gibson, Demario Douglas, Kyle Williams, Javon Baker, all were involved there. The starting return unit had Brendan Schooler, Jack Gibbons, Jalen Hawkins, Craig Woodson, Kaylavon Chason, Christian Ellis, Jaheim Bell, Kayshawn Boutte, Truman Jones, and then Henderson and Antonio Gibson were kind of alternating there. Javon Baker continues to contribute on special teams as well. And then some other notes, Drake Maye and Mike Vrabel got involved in a Special Olympics flag football game after practice. The team from Massachusetts came out to Minnesota against Team Minnesota. So that was cool to see. I think Mike Vrabel was doing the officiating there. But, full field work today, prepping for the Vikings and their zone blitzes, figuring out, how to deal with those complex defenses that are throughout the NFL. I think Thursday's probably going to be more of a red zone focused day, so don't expect Drake Maye to have a huge completion percentage out there. Things get very tight in the red zone. That's basically what they did with the Commanders in joint practice last week, which the Patriots completely outperformed the Commanders, and they did in the preseason game as well. But different ball game out there with Brian Flores' defense. Some other notes, Kyle Duggar, his demotion is continuing. Just out there with the second team only. Mike Vrabel said about Kyle Duggar that he's working on coverage concepts and his attitude is great. Now, he would only say his attitude is great if there were something for him to be disappointed about, which is not being in the starting lineup anymore and potentially not even making the team when you're the second highest paid player on the roster. So, they'll probably keep Duggar around. The more I think about it, it's a huge cap hit. It's good to have some depth at the position. There's so much uncertainty with Craig Woodson. He goes out there maybe as a starter, struggles early on. You can put Kyle Duggar back out there, but I think his time in New England is very limited at this point. So, Carlton Davis was limited in practice today, but he said he's very confident that he'll be out there for week 1. Also, Robert and Jonathan Kraft were on site. Big reunion there with Brian Flores. Mike Vrabel said hi to Brian Flores, so hopefully those bridges aren't burned between him and the Patriots. He was a guy that I thought they should have at least considered in the head coaching search, right? I mean, obviously I wanted Mike Vrabel, liked Ben Johnson, thought he would bring something new, but Brian Flores didn't really get a fair shot down there in Miami, and he will get a head coaching job at some point, and Patriots should have at least considered it, in my opinion, though. I'm glad they picked Vrabel, but, Flores is one of the very best in the NFL, not just as a defensive coach, but as a coach overall. So, going to be a challenge once again for the Patriots. We'll see how they're able to improve heading into the second joint practice. We'll be here at PatsCast to cover it, and of course, we'll be here on Saturday following the Patriots preseason game against the Vikings. If you like this video and you're watching on YouTube, be sure to smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, hit that notification bell, or subscribe if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and we'll see you again tomorrow.